Hi everyone, my name is Michelle and welcome to You Therapy. In this video I'm going to talk about cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT is a research supported modality for reducing depression, anxiety, PTSD, any kind of symptoms that you have where your thinking tends to lead to emotional overwhelm. And as I said in other videos, CBT I don't think is the whole answer. I don't know that anything is the whole answer, but if we can take different puzzle pieces and put them together and figure out what works best for you, oftentimes that's the way that we reduce suffering and increase what you want more of in your life. So in today's video, I'm going to go through the 10 forms of twisted thinking. This is from the David Burns, The Feeling Good book, and I recommend you read that book if you really would like to train yourself to learn CBT really well. You'll have these skills your whole life, the ability to have awareness about your thoughts, challenge them, and hopefully reduce the uncomfortable emotions, or at least keep them from, interfering with your life. So what I'm going to do is, so I don't forget any, I'm going to read the different forms of twisted thinking, even though you'd think I'd have these all memorized by now. I don't. And maybe you'll have a pen and paper nearby if you'd like to keep notes, and maybe just have a record of which ones you find resonate for you the most, and ones that you'd like to work on and have awareness of as you go through your day. So twisted thinking is something that we all do. Irrational thinking is another way to put it. So it's not that someone is, there's something wrong with somebody or they're just not intelligent. Absolutely not. We all do twisted thinking sometimes, but can we become more aware of it and then challenge it? So the first one is called all or nothing thinking. All or nothing thinking is seeing things in black and white categories. So if something is not perfect, a situation, you did some homework or something for, your job, and it wasn't exactly 100% perfect, you might say it's completely blown and a total failure, instead of, okay, some of these things were all right, this part could have been better. So this is not thinking that's positive thinking, saying everything you do is perfect and wonderful. I think that is another way that we can get ourselves into trouble when we do that type of irrational thinking. This is just being more rational about what has happened. 2, overgeneralization. You see a single negative event, such as a rejection, a career reversal, as a never-ending pattern of defeat. So you use the word always, or you use the word never when you think about these things. So, say, I'm going to use something really silly, like there's bird poop on your car. You might say, oh, just my luck. Birds are always, crapping on my car. It always happens to me. Why me? Always me. I mean, it's a silly example, but you can think of a lot of examples in your life where we might use the word always. And I hear this all the time. And the reason that it's a problem is because it's not true. It doesn't always happen. And it makes us depressed when we think that way. And we're trying to avoid depression, obviously, and trying to increase quality of life. The third is called a mental filter. And a mental filter is picking out a single negative detail and you dwell on that exclusively, so your vision of reality becomes darkened. It's like a drop of ink that discolors the water. Say you receive a lot of positive comments about, say, a presentation that you did, but one of the comments is mildly critical. So a mental filter would be obsessing about that one little minor critical comment that was made and ignoring all that positive feedback. Again, that's going to leave you upset, depressed, and it's irrational because you're forgetting about all the positive comments. And just the fact that you did the presentation, maybe you were scared to do it and you stepped up and you did it anyway. Number 4, discounting the positive. You reject positive experiences by insisting that they don't count. Say you do a good job on something, you might tell yourself it wasn't good enough. or that anyone else could have done it. If you discount the positive, you really take the joy out of your life, and you will frequently feel inadequate. You'll feel unrewarded. You know, for some people that have depression, just getting dressed, getting out of the house to do shopping, or even getting off the couch can be a major undertaking when depression is really heavy. But instead of celebrating doing something that was really difficult, a person may say, well, that doesn't count. Everybody does that. Why would I give myself credit for that? It doesn't matter what everybody else does. It's that you did it and it was difficult to do. So give yourself credit for the things that are positive, and remember to do that. Jumping to conclusions. You interpret things negatively when there are no facts to support your conclusion. So for instance, mind reading, it's the number one thing I hear people do. Without checking it out, you arbitrarily just assume that someone is reacting negatively to you. I don't know how many times that I've heard, you know, they were walking down the street or they were somewhere with family, and they could just tell by someone's face that they had a thought about them. Mind reading. No one, as far as I know, can mind read. And so check yourself when you notice that you're assuming what someone else is thinking or feeling. Fortune telling is another way of jumping to conclusions. You predict that things will turn out badly. Before a test, you might tell yourself, oh, I'm going to totally blow it. What if I flunk? And it just depresses you, of course, because you're making this assumption. And you may even say, it will never get better. And back to the always or never even may happen in your thinking. So you're kind of predicting the future, which again, most people cannot predict the future. So check yourself again when you notice that you might be doing that and that it's causing you pain. Number 6 is called magnification. You exaggerate the importance of your problems and shortcomings, or you minimize the importance of your desirable qualities. It's kind of a binocular trick. So if you have one issue going on in your life, you may make that out to be something that takes over and takes control of your life, instead of seeing the whole picture, instead of realizing there are some really good things that you have. You may have a roof over your head, you have food, you have some other good things. You may have a pet that loves you. So let's not magnify or exaggerate the importance of problems. Number 7 is called emotional reasoning. You assume that your negative emotions are necessarily reflecting the way things really are. So I feel really scared about going on airplanes, so that must mean it's dangerous to fly. Or I'm feeling this intense guilt. I must have done something terrible, or I must be a terrible person. I feel angry. Well, that proves that someone has mistreated me because I'm feeling angry. I feel inferior, so I must be a lesser person. I'm hopeless. I feel hopeless, despair. It must be that life is hopeless, or that this situation is hopeless and will never get better. So looking at the fact that you may be making this assumption based on a feeling, and let's go back to giving the feeling some time and honoring a feeling, because a feeling is always right. So if you're feeling sad, can we just pay attention to sadness and honor it and care for the sadness without making some story around the sadness and making that sadness worse? 8 is should statements. You tell yourself that something should be a certain way. Someone should do this or should have known that. Something should be the way you hoped or expected it to be. Say you played something really difficult on a musical instrument, and after you played this difficult piece, you told yourself, oh, I shouldn't have made so many mistakes. And then you feel disgusted, you quit practicing maybe for a while. Saying must, saying ought to, have to, those are similar offenders. There is no must, there is no have to, there is no ought to. That is irrational thinking, and it is not true, and it can't be proven to be true. It'd be nice if you hadn't made those mistakes. I wish it had been otherwise. That's rational thinking. Yeah, I wish it had been otherwise, but I did, practice it. I did do it. Should statements that are directed at yourself lead to guilt? They lead to frustration. When they're directed against other people, the world, it can lead you to isolate yourself or to really make conclusions about another person. If you say, oh, they should have done this and they ought to have done that, you may have liked them to, but the fact is they didn't, and there is no should or ought to. Some people try to motivate themselves with the should and ought to, like I really, I'm not going to do better unless I tell myself that. And it doesn't tend to work very well. And it often leads to that guilt and that frustration. And it's not necessary. It does not help. If you're trying to motivate yourself with this, you might start to just punish yourself if you're not living up to some ideal that you have of yourself. So I shouldn't have eaten that donut. This shouldn't have. It does not work, because then it starts to make you feel rebellious. You get the urge to do the opposite sometimes, and it just causes, again, increased pain. Labeling, it's an extreme form of the all or nothing thinking. Instead of I made a mistake, you attach a negative label to yourself. So you call yourself or someone else a loser, a jerk, a fool, a failure. Labels, again, are irrational. They are not correct thinking. There's no such thing as a loser. Yeah, you may have made some mistakes in life, but that does not mean that as a person, anybody is a loser or anything else. It's irrational because you're not the same as what you do. So let's separate what someone does from who they are as a person. Human beings exist. They make mistakes. The labels are just useless abstractions, and they lead to anger, anxiety, frustration, pain. And labeling others when they rub you the wrong way, you may call them names. You may say there's something wrong with someone's character or their essence, instead of just their thinking or their behavior, and you see them as totally bad or a bad person, and it starts to make you feel hostile and hopeless about improving things, and it leaves little room for constructive communication or seeing the whole of the person or seeing the things that are positive about that person. Doesn't mean you have to have toxic or abusive people in your life, absolutely not. But when we focus on those negatives or focused on name calling, we really can separate ourselves from other people. And the last one is called personalization and blame. That occurs when you hold yourself personally responsible for an event that is not totally under your control. So say a mom receives a note about their child having difficulties at school, and they tell themselves, oh, this proves what a bad mother I am. Instead of just trying to pinpoint the cause of the behavior, trying to solve the behavior, trying to understand it. So say you're mistreated by somebody. A person may say to themselves, if only I were a better person or better at something, that person wouldn't mistreat me. Personalization leads to guilt. It leads to shame. It leads to feelings of inadequacy, and it can lead someone to stay in situations that are not safe for them, or could lead them to not being helpful to, say, that child that was in need of their help. They took it all on themselves instead of looking at the child and saying, how can I help make this better? Some people do the opposite of that. They might blame other people for their circumstances or their problems, and they overlook ways that they might be contributing to their own problem. So they might say the reason that my marriage is so terrible is because my spouse is just a terrible person. Well, blame doesn't usually work. It doesn't usually work very well because other people resent it. They're not going to try and change if you put all the blame on them. they're going to feel scapegoated, and they're going to just toss the blame right back in your lap. And it's like a kind of a game of hot potato. No one wants to hold that potato. Now, again, this is not about staying in abusive relationships, because sometimes it is true that one person is acting in a way that is abusive and will not change. Again, that's not calling someone a name and saying that that is the essence of their personality, but if their behavior is as a pattern, toxic, pain-causing, abusive, that's a different situation than normal human mistakes, things that you would like the person to do different in their life. And so let's be sure that we keep those separate and understand that everyone makes mistakes. Everyone can be a jerk sometimes. Back to the name calling. Everyone can act in a way that is that's hurtful sometimes. That doesn't mean that that is what the person's essence is. So let's keep the personalization out, and you will increase your feeling of contentment, happiness, joy in your life if we can be looking at behavior versus essence of the person. So those are the 10 forms of twisted thinking. I know I went through them pretty quickly, but do any of those jump out for you as ones that might be getting in your way? If so, maybe, journal to yourself about it. If you feel like making some, comments on this video about things that you noticed, ones you'd like to work on, or any questions that you have about cognitive behavioral therapy. There is more to it, but this is the main part of it, are these 10 forms of twisted thinking. You don't have to memorize these. You don't have to rememorize, was that personalization or was that all or nothing? That's not what it's about. These are sort of divided up just to make it easier to learn them. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Be well.